Hello, Motion Mystique Stories here. Today I'm going to explain to you a movie called The Banshees of Inisherin. Sit back, relax, and grab a pint as I take you to a different world. The movie begins in a small village with Patrick as he goes to get his best friend Colum so that they can head over to their favorite bar and have a pint. Upon reaching Colum's house, however, he doesn't answer the door despite him being in the house having a smoke. Patrick decides to head along and wait for him at the bar, though this unusual behavior from his best friend troubles him. When he reaches the bar, everyone is surprised why he is not in the company of his friend. Here we learn that Patrick and Colum have been best friends for as long as everyone can remember. The bartender, Johnjo, tells him to go back and see whether everything is all right with his friend. On his way to Colum's house, Patrick meets a police officer and says hello to him. The police officer, however, doesn't answer, and we find out that he has always been like this. He doesn't say hello back to people. Patrick arrives at Colum's house and he doesn't find him inside. He only manages to see him through the window as he is leaving. This confuses Patrick even more. Where could the old man be heading to? Patrick heads back to the bar and is surprised to find his friend there. Upon seeing Patrick, however, he doesn't want to sit with him or have anything to do with him. He goes to sit outside the bar away from everyone else. Patrick wonders why a grown man could act like a fool of a moody schoolchild. He follows him outside to inquire what the problem could be. Colum tells him that he no longer wants to be friends with him. This revelation deeply troubles Patrick and he decides to go home. On his way, he meets Dominic, who is the son of the police officer who never says hello back. Dominic tries to strike a chat with him, but Patrick is not in the mood for one. Back at Patrick's house, we find out that he lives with his sister, Siobhan. She has been unable to get married owing to her difficult and woke nature towards men. Siobhan tells her brother that they'll be having a visitor that night, an old woman called Sra from the same village. We also find out that Sra is not everyone's cup of tea, as she is always a bearer of bad news. What is wrong with the women in this village? When the women get to have their chat, Patrick gets bored and decides to go back to the bar. He'd rather hang out with his drunk compadres than listen to the women talking about the Kardashians. Back at the bar, he finds his friend Colum having the best time of his life. He is performing a song to a small group of men and chicks. They will probably feature in his upcoming song as his video vixens. This makes Patrick jealous since he can't seem to understand how his longtime friend has managed to get new friends within no time. Come on, Patrick, move on for crying out loud. Dominic then joins Patrick and they decide to hang out and feel miserable together. Dominic later sneaks into his father's house as the man sits there naked, blacked out from drinking. He steals his whiskey and they head over to enjoy it with Patrick amidst their drunken talk. In their talk, Dominic asks Patrick whether he has ever seen his sister naked since they live in the same house. Patrick, however, is not comfortable talking about such a topic. He decides that they should talk about Colum and why he has suddenly decided to end their lifelong friendship. Dominic, however, gets upset and he leaves. He won't sit here and listen to a man whine about his ex-friend. The next morning, Patrick takes a look at the calendar and realizes that the previous day was April 1st, Fool's Day. He goes to find Colum to tell him to cut the crap about his weird behavior since Fool's Day is already over. Colum, however, doesn't respond to him. Patrick promises to pass by his house at 2 p.m. to pick him so that they can head to the bar, and he leaves. Upon getting to Colum's house at 2 p.m., however, he doesn't find him. He only manages to see him sneak away with his dog. He finds him at the bar and becomes furious with him. He demands to know why he's behaving like a small boy. Colum finally explains himself. He tells Patrick that he no longer finds their friendship worthwhile. He considers Patrick a boring man who has no plans for his future. Apart from their routine beer drinking and empty talk, he offers nothing else to his life. Colum says that he has now found his purpose and wants to concentrate on making music. He might as well churn out a few bangers before he expires. He argues that the music he will leave behind will be remembered for centuries to come. Their empty friendship and aimless chatting won't, however, be remembered by anyone. He even goes on to play a tune that he just made this morning. Come on, old man, you're already 200 years old. It took you long enough to finally find out your purpose. He asks Patrick to go and have his beer somewhere else where he won't disturb his creative session. Later, when Siobhan learns of the rift that has suddenly developed between the two friends, she goes to confront Colum. He tells her that he no longer has room for dullness in his life, and that's why he ended his friendship with her brother. That night, as the siblings are having their dinner, Patrick inquires whether he is a dull and dim person. The sister soothes him that he is the most entertaining lad in the village. They conclude that perhaps Colum is depressed. That's the most reasonable thing they can think of to explain his sudden change. On their way to church the next day, they meet Dominic, who has bruises on his face. He tells them that his father found out about the whiskey he stole the other day and beat the stars out of him using a kettle. Dominic requests to hide at their home until his father cools down. Shaban is a bit reluctant, but Patrick pities the boy and offers to host him for a night. They then ride off to church. After the service, we see Patrick talking to the priest outside the church. We then cut to Colum and the priest inside the confession box. After his confession, the priest asks him why he is not friends with Patrick anymore. He admits that Patrick asked him to throw in a word for him to Colum. Colum then makes his way to the bar furious. He asks Patrick to stop asking his sister, the priest, or anyone else to talk to him on his behalf. He wants the two of them to be a done story. To prove his seriousness, he swears to cut a finger from his hand and give it to Patrick if he continues to bother him. That night during supper, Dominic proves to be quite a nuisance. He goes on to tell Patrick to provoke Colum and see whether he is serious about cutting his finger. He would still be able to play the fiddle with 4 fingers, right? He pushes his mouthiness too far when he asks Shaban why she has never been married. This angers her so much that she says she'd rather have their small donkey Jenny sleep inside their house than Dominic. Something about Dominic's behavior seems to be unhinged. The next morning, Patrick goes to town to deliver milk to town. He finds Sra at the milk shop, but he ignores her. The milkwoman complains that he never brings any news from the village. She considers him a dim and boring man. Dominic's father, the policeman, then walks in and the lady is happy because he always brings entertaining news from the village. He goes on to tell her about a man who recently drowned himself and another who stabbed his wife to death with a spoon. The milkwoman is impressed. In a bid to appear more entertaining and outshine the policeman, Patrick talks about how Dominic was beaten recently by his father with a kettle. He goes on to say that the boy fled home and is currently living with him. The milkwoman considers this shite news and dismisses him. Dominic's father is not happy being painted in such a bad light in public. He decides to follow Patrick outside where he punches him to the ground. Colum is, however, observing from a distance. He decides to help his old friend onto his cart. Sra observes the two men silently from the milk shop's window. Colum escorts him halfway home without them exchanging even a single word. Patrick starts sobbing when Colum hands him the horse reins and walks off home. We then see Patrick sitting on the floor of his house. The little donkey Jenny comes to give him company. This company is better than no company at all. He later walks with his donkey to the bar where Colum is also present having a chat with Dominic's father. After having enough to drink, he heads over to where the men are seated and causes a fuss. He goes on to embarrass Dominic's father for beating his son, and luckily, he isn't punched this time round. After expressing his hate for policemen, he then turns to Colum and tells him he also hates fiddle players and musicians. Colum tries to tell him to walk away, but he refuses. Patrick goes on to pour out his heart about their now gone sour friendship and goes home. Patrick then goes to apologize to Colum the next day. Colum, on the other hand, doesn't want to hear none of it. He can't seem to understand why Patrick just won't leave him in peace. Once at home, we see him deep in thought while his little donkey gives him company inside the house. When his sister comes, she is furious to find the donkey inside the house and tells him that animals belong outside. A few minutes later, they hear a thud on the door. Patrick goes to check and behold, he sees a freshly cut finger on the ground. He then sees Colum from a distance walking away. Upon showing the finger to Shaban, she is terrified. Patrick mentions that he will take the finger back to Colum, but his sister considers this the dumbest thing she's ever heard. She decides to take the finger to Colum herself. Days pass by and things seem to be shaping up well for everyone. Colum delves in his music while Patrick seems to have found a new friend in his donkey Jenny. Sometimes he spends time with Dominic as they enjoy a bottle of whiskey. He seems to have gotten the message now, but this new life doesn't compare to the friendship he and Colum had. One day as he is walking in the village, Patrick sees the old woman, Sra, and decides to hide until she passes. She, however, spots him and tells him that 2 deaths will occur in the village in a month's time. She says they should all pray it doesn't happen to him or his sister Shaban. This news leaves Patrick shocked and afraid. In the next scene, Patrick bursts into Colum's house and finds him dancing with his dog. He gives him a slagging and confesses about how he has not been doing well lately due to their broken friendship. As they continue talking, things seem to have gone back to normal between the two friends. Patrick even offers to meet him later at the pub and buy him drinks. At the bar, he goes ahead and orders the beers as he waits for his four-fingered friend to come. However, he never shows up. The only person who shows up is Shaban, who tells him to go home with her because she has something she wants to discuss with him. She tells her she is planning to leave the village very soon. Why is everyone suddenly leaving from his life? The scene then cuts to Colum walking over to Patrick's home. He suddenly stops and throws four fingers at the door, one after the other. The siblings meet with him on the road on his way back. They freeze in shock when they notice his left hand missing all the fingers and dripping in blood. He walks between them without uttering a single word. The two rush home where Shaban starts packing immediately. He tries to stop her and make her stay a bit longer, but she refuses. She tells him that she isn't going to wait for the madness that is slowly taking over the village. She also can't believe that Patrick went ahead and talked to Colum despite her stern warning and Colum's previous first finger. Now his one hand is fingerless because of him. They hug it out, and Shaban leaves. We later see Patrick standing on a cliff waving goodbye to his sister who's on a boat sailing away. When he gets back home, he finds calamity waiting for him. He finds his little donkey Jenny dead. This is the last straw on the already stressed-up Patrick. He learns that the donkey apparently died after attempting to chew on one of Colum's fingers and choked from it. He grieves for the donkey and buries it at sunset. In the next scene, we see Colum in the bar enjoying his music with the other revelers despite his fingerless hand bleeding. No one seems to mind. Patrick then walks in a few seconds later, fuming with anger. Colum goes over to him and tells him that they should now call it quits and everyone should go his way to avoid any further loss of fingers. Patrick, however, tells him that his fat finger killed his donkey and that things have only just began. He tells him that as things stand now, he is willing to take this to the grave of whoever dies first. He then swears to burn down Colum's house the following day, a Sunday, the Lord's Day. He instructs him to leave his dog outside since he has nothing against it, so he doesn't want it to burn along with the house. As for Colum himself, he can stay inside if he wishes. Minutes later, Dominic's father, the policeman, comes and starts to harass Patrick. Colum intervenes and punches him to the ground with one hand. After the church service the next day, he goes home and carries a few things he will need: some wood, lanterns, and gasoline. He then sets off for Colum's house where he finds the dog outside. He puts it on his cart and proceeds to place the wood at the doors and windows before setting the house ablaze. Before leaving, he peers through the window and sees Colum inside, seated having a smoke like he doesn't care. Patrick goes home, leaving the house to burn down. Back at home, we see that Patrick is still reeling in his grief. The animals have even moved inside the house to live with him, but he doesn't care anymore. Outside, Dominic's father is making his way to Patrick's house when Sra calls onto him to follow her. He is led to the lake shore where his son's dead body is pulled from the water. He starts weeping. He will not have someone to batter no more. Meanwhile, the next day we see Sra sitting outside Colum's burnt-down house. It's crazy how she just tends to hover around over every dark moment. Colum is standing a distance away overlooking the lake. Patrick appears a while later accompanied by Colum's dog. The dog runs ahead to Colum. Colum says that they are now square since Patrick burnt down his house. Patrick, however, doesn't think so. He tells him that they would be square if he had stayed inside the house as it burnt. Colum thanks Patrick for looking after his dog nonetheless. The movie then ends. Remember to support our channel by subscribing and liking this video. Turn on the bell to get notified when we post new videos. See you in the next video.